What's going on, sports card hobby family? We are back again, another day, another video. We're going to go back a little bit, talk about a topic that I've talked about quite a bit before, but it's been a little bit, it's been a few months, and so I wanted to revisit. Don't overspend on sports cards and collectibles the same way that I have in the past. We'll kind of dive in and kind of talk through some of the things that I've been thinking about. Actually was put onto this topic, reminded of it again by Swaggle Comics. Swaggle did a good job with a video about 24 hours ago. He's actually speaking about it on the comic book side, but still in the collectible space. And really, I think a lot of the buys, whether it be speculative buys or nostalgia buys, or we could call it, it's all coming from the same place, so a similar place with collectors / speculators / investors. The one thing I think is interesting that we talk about is, there's a lot of talk about make sure you're using disposable income and not over leveraging, which is kind of what he was talking about, using credit cards and that sort of thing. I think that the other problem, though, is even if you've got that set up right, so let's say it's all disposable income, you're not necessarily putting stuff on credit cards and letting that credit card balance build up, but what about just opportunity cost right now? I think that's really a bigger conversation, or an equally as big conversation as the don't take out bad debt part. The opportunity cost, what do I mean by that? Well, right now, cash is king. It has been for a while. You can actually get a decent return from a savings account for the first time in years, more than a decade. I mean, I remember going back to the early 2000s, I had a PayPal account, and I remember it used to get 4% or something sitting in my PayPal account and a money market fund. And I was like, man, this is so good. But it's literally been, 15 years since we've had anything like that. We've been in the low interest rate environment for so long. I think we've all forgotten what it's like to actually have money sit in a money market account and do okay. And so it eliminates a lot of risk that you would normally see in speculative buys like what we see in collectibles. Now, I think part of the problem too is it's not fun to have your cash sit in the bank. Whereas it is fun to go out and try to, make moves and to speculate on certain things, or not even just speculate short term, but also speculate long term. I think I do quite a bit of that as well, where sure, there might be certain things where I'm looking at like, okay, I could buy this, maybe I'm flipping it in a year or 6 months to a year, something like that. But there's also just things that I'm like, man, I like this over a long period of time. My Tom Brady stuff that I buy is kind of in that bucket of, that's a GOAT player that I think is going to hold up over time. So it's fun for me to kind of find deals where I see them, especially because his market's come down pretty dramatically over the last year especially. And I think other people do this as well, whether it's for Michael Jordan or Lionel Messi or whoever your GOAT is, or your Hall of Famer that you are choosing to put money into. And so going back to January 2023, I made a video about sports card addiction, really kind of talking about my struggles with just overspending, not really having any good impulse control over buying. I have gotten better with it, but I will say it's still something that I deal with, that I have to check myself. The one big thing that I've done though is just kind of revamp in 2023, going all the way back to January, just where my money goes. As soon as kind of, money comes in, it has a place now, to where it's going to this or that, whether it be extra money onto the mortgage, or it's paying off this debt, or it's going somewhere. There's a plan for all of it. There's not any sort of disposable income that's just like sitting there like, what am I doing with this disposable income? It all has a place. I'm also in a fortunate spot, thanks to you all, that the channel helps fund some of my hobby as well. And in 2023, I've really learned how to sell and to look at my PC and just my holdings more cynically, and to look at it more strategically, look at it and just say like, hey, what do I really need? What do I really want? Do I still feel this way about this particular player or thing or whatever it is? Can I sell it? And so I'm selling things to get into other things, and something that I hadn't really done much of prior to 2023. I did going back to 2019, 2020, and into 2021. I would, buy and sell, as stuff would go up and, prices going bonkers and that sort of thing. But I got away from that. And so it was time to kind of, hey, it's time to get back in to see what have I accumulated and what makes sense to hold on to? What do I really, really like? And if I do want more things or other things, what am I okay with moving off from? And just kind of getting into that zone, that has really helped as well to offset, the buying, kind of the want to get into a new or different collectible, because it's always there. I feel like there's always the allure of some new, pop culture collectible or sports card or vintage card or whatever it is. There's always kind of something that's pulling at you, and prices for a lot of this stuff have come down from where they were. Gotten down for a lot of cards, especially the stuff that's more common. but good cards to where they're kind of like pre-2020 prices, and you're like, oh man, maybe I do want to pick something like this up. So, there's always that struggle. I'm still a work in progress on this, but I've definitely gotten a lot more structured, a lot more disciplined, and learned kind of how to offset sells with buys and that sort of thing, to help make it a lot more manageable. I think I'll say too, and something that, partly prompted me to make the video is I just don't feel very comfortable in this economy. It's so strange how, we've just been on this rate increase for the last 18 months, if you can believe it. I know that they've kind of held steady the last month. I think that I saw a word that they're not expected to raise rates here in the next few days, but it's just a flat kind of elevated federal fund rate, inverted yield curve. It just doesn't look great. It doesn't give you the warm and fuzzies. It doesn't feel like, we're in a great economic period. It doesn't. And I know that depending on what news you're watching, some of the news stations are like, hey, this is a booming economy. Others are like, this is awful. So it's really hard to kind of get a gauge on it. It's just my overall sense. I see a lot of layoffs in the news. And I think the longer that we have pressure on business with these higher rates, of course, it means that business can't borrow as easily. They're going to be more conservative. They're going to look at cost savings and where can we cut costs? And so these are things that businesses have to take into account. And unfortunately, a lot of times that means layoffs. And we have been seeing that. We've seen, I know they come out with these job reports where it's like, we've added 200,000 jobs this month. But then I've seen other kind of after the fact reports that are like, oh, but after we've adjusted these numbers, it was actually far less, or we were negative. There was actually no job growth. There was a lot of jobs went by the wayside. And so I look at these numbers and it's all, whether we're talking about CPI or unemployment, and it just doesn't feel like we're in some sort of amazing economy. It just doesn't. Or one that looks to be kind of getting better on the mend. I'm not saying that we don't have a bustling economy here in the US, because fortunately we do, but it's definitely a lot tighter. Lending is a lot tighter. People aren't running out to get mortgages at 7, maybe even 8%. And if you don't have good credit, maybe, I don't know if it's not 8, 9%, whatever it is, that's higher than it's been in 15 years, 20 years, so these things eventually become problems. I think we've seen symptoms of some problems out there as far as, folks really feeling some heat, but I hope for kind of more of that soft landing that everyone is hoping for, to where it's not mass recession and, we're all trying to figure it out and scrambling around. That's the hope. That federal fund rate, keeping it elevated like that, it'll be interesting to see how long that goes. I did see a lot of the big investment banks, Goldman Sachs came out with a report saying, and actually they've been fairly spot on going back a couple of years, talking about how they expect a lot of rate increases coming, and they were right. But they've been saying middle of next year, summertime, that they expect rates to come back down a little bit. It just all depends too. What are we talking about? I don't think they go down as far as what they had been, but even just a little bit of relief off of it, I feel like would give businesses more confidence and have them kind of get back in the game and things be a little bit more normal-ish. But we will see. I think it's one of those kind of big nobody knows type scenarios, but it's just something I'm not very comfortable with right now. And so I know my family in 2023 just been a lot more conservative and kind of trying to save as much as we can, trying not to spend maybe on extras like we normally would, because it might be disposable income, but there's an opportunity cost to it. You can invest in this thing, or you can spend it here, but you also could just put it in the bank and sit on it and cash, you put it into a money market account or something and just kind of see what happens for a rainy day. We've been trying to do a little bit more of that. But we'll see how it goes, guys. I hope that all is well. And that's really kind of the larger conversation is for me, I've been looking at it internally, like, I want to make sure that I'm being as responsible as I can. I've got a big family. Not everybody does. Everyone's got their own situation. So this might not apply to you. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't. But I hope that you all are well. Stay healthy. Stay awesome. And I will talk to you again later.